This is Nikki Collins.
Jordan Canada.
Essence Carson.
Liz Candace.
Imani Media Stafford.
And you're listening to WNBA Weekly.
Hey there, WNBA fans. Welcome to another special episode of WNBA Weekly, part of our interview series that we're doing leading up to the 2019 season. And we are excited to have on the show today assistant coach of the Minnesota Lynx, Walt Hopkins. Starting in 2017 with the Lynx. Before that, he was at UVU, and before that, he worked with the Tulsa Shock. So he's a long coaching pedigree, especially within the WNBA, and we're honored to have him on the program. I know you don't want to hear from me anymore, so without further ado, Logan Jones, my co-host, has Walt Hopkins on the phone, so I'll toss it over to you, Logan.
First, obviously we're going to get to some things going on with the Lynx roster and the questions there in the upcoming season, but first, we just brought up how you were a coach at Utah Valley just 4 or 5 years ago. What's it like going from a college like Utah Valley to being in the pros in that short amount of time?
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting back and forth. So I actually was with the Tulsa Shock. I did my master's at Harvard, and then I went straight from there to the WNBA. I was coaching with the Tulsa Shock for a season in 2013, and then I went actually from there to UVU. So I had already been, I'd already had the experience in the league, and it was much different. We actually had a really, really kind of a special group at UVU. It wasn't a, particularly athletic or super talented group, but it was a really smart group. And they were like chess pieces. I mean, anything we put in, they could run it, and they ran it to a T. And they were like top in offensive efficiency and like number 2 in defensive efficiency. And they were just like without a lot of, highly recruited players. So it was actually a lot of fun. I mean, I think those are really good learning years. The time I've spent teaching kids has helped me, and I mean kids, not, UVU players, 6-year-olds, trying to teach them a crossover, a jab step. It's amazing how much you learn to teach pros because you have to break down those things, So kind of every level of coaching that I've been at, I've really found value, and it brings value to what I do every day with the pros.
Awesome. So in your 6 years since being with Tulsa originally, and sorry for me overlooking that, but
no problem.
Has the league changed, and how has the league changed in that amount of time?
Yeah, I think it has. I think that you're kind of starting to see a revolution with the bigger players, the bigger skilled players, kind of like you had in the NBA, where you have the stretch 4 start to be a thing. In the WNBA, you've got, Deladon and Stewie, you've got Jonquel Jones, and all these players are really developing beyond the traditional skill sets. So the pace of the game, the depth and breadth of talent, I think all those things have grown. And then I think you've got some kind of, I don't know, in terms of like the college players even, you're just seeing more and more talent. You're seeing more and more kind of exceptions to rules. Big, small forward, big point guards. I think it's kind of moving in a direction that's really exciting. Even in that short period of time, players like Liz Candace and Brittany Griner and things like that, we still have the old guard. We still have, these big bigs. And then you have Jonquel Jones and you have Stewie and Deladon, who are, just pretty remarkable talents, despite being almost the same size, as your traditional big.
Yeah. You're talking about big names. I think one of the major storylines coming into this season is that the league's going to be without some of its bigger names, be it injury or other circumstances. The Lynx specifically, Lindsay Whalen and Maya Moore not being with the roster. How does that impact how the young players are going to approach this season?
Yeah, I think it impacts all of us. I mean, I think it impacts our daily work. There's a little bit more teaching, which I really enjoy. I enjoy getting to spend the time breaking things down and teaching the nuances in every action and every way that we defend pick and roll, or the way that we defend off the ball or on the ball. I mean, all these little things. It's good for the vets to hear it again. I think all of us coaches, players, we all kind of assume at a certain point that, people have these things down, but, it's just so easy to forget. You get all that time off between seasons. And I think things tend to slip through the cracks. So it's really good, I think, for everybody. Obviously for the young players in particular, getting that level of teaching where we don't feel like we have to, we got to get through this because we've got to get to the other stuff that, the older players, that this is, tedious for them. We don't want it to be tedious. And then, sometimes the younger players don't get as much teaching. This year, you don't have to worry about that. I think it's more so that our older players are really, they've been great in the preseason and now in training camp about taking the time to explain things, understanding the value of us taking the time to break things down a little bit more. And I think everyone's going to benefit from that. So I think obviously the energy is a little different when you've got a young team, for better and for worse in some ways. But in terms of just pure energy and hustle and work ethic and everything like that, it's just been a blast because everyone's so hungry and it's so new for them.
Sure. When it comes to that individual skill development, working with players specifically on things that you want to develop throughout the preseason and the season, what's it like to have such a condensed schedule between the draft and the start of the season? Whereas you can look at the NBA and even other pro sports leagues, and they have this entire off-season regimen, and they have months after the draft to kind of plan around their team and their new players.
Yeah.
What's it like having to do that in such a short amount of time?
It obviously it can handicap you, in terms of players growing their games. I think there have been a few examples of players who, be it because of injury or family things or things like that. Sometimes players have a way to make money stateside, so they don't go overseas, and so they get that off season to be able to develop. Danielle Robinson had an injury at the end of last year, and so she's been able to stay, and I've gotten to work with her this whole off season. The amount of growth I think that people are going to see from Danielle, it's pretty remarkable. She's come a long way, and what's so impressive is that you can give a lot of players the same tools. Some of them are not going to be able to implement them, and some of them will try to implement them and they won't do so successfully. And even working with the best of the best, sometimes, can't teach an old dog new tricks, that type of thing. Sometimes players are just so ingrained in how they do things. Danielle has taken everything that we've worked on, be it Coach Reeve sitting down with her and watching film, or me being out on the court where they're teaching her new skills. It's unbelievable how far she's come. And I think to answer your question more directly, it's harder when you don't have that off season with players. So now, there's some players who are here and I'm trying to catch them up on, they see Danielle do things within an action. They see how she finishes, or they see her footwork, and they're trying to learn what she had 4 or 5 months to learn. They're trying to do it in a week. So obviously it's a big disadvantage for our players and for our league, because the development you see in a CJ McCollum from year to year, there's so many players in the NBA. You can go down the list and say, wow, look at how they were as a rookie. And then by the next season, they spent that whole off season developing. They get really good work in, take care of their bodies. They have people feeding them right. And it's amazing how far a player can come with good coaching and when they put in the time. And so it's definitely one of the many reasons why the way that our, salaries and league is structured is makes it harder for the players to develop and for the final product that we put on the court to be, as good as it probably could be.
Absolutely. Obviously love hearing about Danielle Robinson getting healthy. She's someone that we consider a pretty good friend of the show. Also love that you brought up CJ McCollum. I've actually, this is a little bit random. I'm a huge Blazer fan. I'm from Oregon. And I had the opportunity to interview CJ McCollum kind of after his breakout third season, when he really established himself as one of the pillars of that Portland team. And he brought up a really interesting point about how in the NBA you've got 3 seasons to prove that you were worth the draft pick. You've got that amount of time before you're off your rookie contract. What is that timeline like in the WNBA, where there's fewer teams, there's limited rosters, and really just more limited opportunities to make a squad? Is that timeline about the same, or is it even shorter?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's situational. I think it depends on, if you're coming into a team that has 4 or 5 roster spots open, which is rare, but it happens, because of injuries, because of overseas people being late, things like that. That can change things drastically versus, you have teams like we had last year where, it was just who was going to make it outside the first pick. It would just be really hard. You'd have to unseat a vet, who you trust. And, so I think it's pretty dramatically different, in that way, because there are so few roster spots, and, obviously our draft is smaller, and like we said, the pool of talent has grown dramatically in college. So, based on different, metrics that we use, in order to evaluate players, the amount of players who meet the minimum level of our metrics to be able to, if we were able to forecast out for, the history of the WNBA, the players who have come out of college and hit these various numbers, that number has grown, triple what it was in the past 3 years. So the pool of talent is growing so much, yet the players aren't going anywhere. And the WNBA, the really, really good ones, Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird, I mean, there's 37, their games haven't gone downhill. So where are the roster spots coming from? What players are being ousted in order to bring in these new ones? The rookie scale contract is similar. We have the option to pick up a fourth year, with a lot of the rookie contracts. So it's that 3-year evaluation period is I think pretty similar, but the hard part is that because the roster spots are so few and far in between, that when you're one of those players who are on their first 3 years and you don't develop in 1 or 2, and you have a young gun coming in there who's a new 3 years, salary cap to think about, the fact that, that player's about to get off their rookie scale contract, and, we have to fit everybody in, 11 or 12 players. And, that player is going to demand a pay raise probably. And, the rookie scale thing is very much relevant for us too.
Sure. Just in terms of the Lynx this year, moving into a season where it feels like the landscape of the WNBA changes every year. When you're evaluating the draft, you're evaluating young players, what your team needs. Is there any quality that you put above all else that's maybe your starting point for scouting a player? Like if they have this quality, we'll take a deeper look at them. What is that thing that a player needs?
I hate to give a kind of a tired response to that, but it really is a holistic process. For me, and I think for the rest of our staff, but for me in particular, I know that there's not anything that I would say makes that a player above reproach. So if there's, let's say somebody shoots 45% from 3 and, grabs 12 rebounds a game, but they're a massive pain in the butt and they're selfish and, they don't look out for their teammates, and, you can tell, you watch those things, and we vet these players to a really extensive degree to find out what kind of people they are, because that's tremendous, of tremendous importance for our franchise. I know for a lot of other franchises. So it's hard for me to say because, also you can have a really high character kid come out of college and they're just not good enough, and you love them and they're great. And, they play hard every possession. They do all those little things, but they're just not talented enough, or they don't have a skill that translates to the WNBA because there's only 144 roster spots, and because this league is getting so good year after year. I just think it's really hard to put a premium on any one thing. I think players have to be able to do multiple things and do them well. In addition to having, high character and being selfless. And, so yeah, it's, I think to answer your question, it's just getting more and more difficult to pinpoint any one thing.
Awesome. Great answer. I don't want to toot my own horn here, but this is such a great interview. I love this. You're welcome back on the show.
Good. Good. I appreciate it.
I won't keep you for too much longer. Just a couple more questions for you here. But what is that experience like when you're speaking with a player who comes in and they've got all the character stuff, they've got all those qualities you want in a teammate, but there's only 144 spots, and you might have to have that conversation with them about other options, be it playing overseas or trying to prolong their opportunities in the league. Have you been a part of those conversations, and how do you approach those sorts of interactions?
I think, one of the things that this isn't trying to position ourselves or be political or, make the Lynx look good, but it's truly what I've experienced here. that's been unique in all the places I've coached. That there really is a genuine concern for the person, for the people's well-being in the franchise. Anyone we bring in, the staff caring about one another. I mean, it really is a pretty special place, and I don't think it's coincidence. This organization, well before I got here, was one of the most successful in history. It surprised me when I got here because that was kind of what I studied in grad school was, the relational aspects of coaching and psychology, social psychology, and things like that. It's always been interesting to me. It's always been a part of how I've approached coaching because I knew what I needed as a player, and I knew I needed that connectedness. I was always a leader and a captain on my teams, even though I wasn't the best, because I would have been one of those character kids. I would have been one of the ones that was smart and hardworking and just not quite athletic enough. So I think you can approach those conversations in a variety of ways. You can prime players with the idea that this is what you're up against. There's this few roster spots. Look at our team. Look at what we have, what we need, what skills we need, and you might be a phenomenal rebounder, but you have two of those right in front of you at your position. So how can you develop to make yourself different? What skill do you have that stands out? That maybe next season we bring you back in. Jillian Aileen, we brought her back to training camp when we cut her last year, and the decision was made as a staff, and I wasn't actually there for the conversation. I think Cheryl had the conversation with her, so I don't know exactly what was said, but I think it's always along the lines of we're going to let the player know these are the things that are fantastic about you. These are the things that will allow you to have a chance to make it in this league. And Jillian Aileen's a perfect example of somebody who is unbelievably high character. I mean, you're never going to see her not smiling. She always asks the right questions. She never stops working hard. She's great. And she's improved physically and talent-wise tremendously from the last time we saw her. I mean, she's really developed in every way we asked her to. So because the concern is about the player and it's genuine, we're going to tell them, these are the things that we think give you a shot to grow in a way that you need to make it in this league. So if it's a player who, can't shoot the three, and they really need to be able to because they're undersized or, they're missing different things, then that would be something we would tell them. We would say, these are some of the resources. These are, some of the things you can think about when you do your workouts, and we'll give them all the tools we can to help them do. And then hopefully they get the work they need in the interim, and then the chance comes and we can bring them back. It works out so that we do need their position, and we give them that second look. And it doesn't always work out that way. I mean, sometimes, camp, the players we draft, and, it could have been that we drafted 3 power forwards this year, 3 centers, and we just didn't have a need to bring Jill back to camp. And, that would have been unfortunate, but that's how things go. And they know that. And we'll always do what we can to help them, find a spot. I think I hit most of the stuff for that question, right?
No, I appreciate you diving so much into that and giving us some insight into kind of how those interactions happen and what happens kind of behind the scenes in some of these locker rooms before the season. Coach Hopkins with the Minnesota Lynx, this has been great. I've one last question for you before we let you go. I won't make you pick the 2019 WNBA champion. I'm just going to ask you this. What will it take this year for Minnesota, which has a great track record in this league, to be the WNBA title winner at the end of the season?
I think the word championship, I think the concept of the championship is so far out of where I would want our lens to be focused on right now. The idea of every year, and this could be, 2017, where we are fully loaded with Maya and Lindsay and and Simone and everyone. Even in a season like that, it's focusing on the day-to-day details. It's focusing in on staying connected as a team, about taking care of your teammates, about the staff taking care of each other, about showing up and doing the little things every single day, every single rep, every practice, away from practice, communicating via text and calls when we need things, asking questions and providing thoughtful responses. I mean, these things are probably the least focused on and the most important aspect of what gets those teams to those places, be it us or other teams like a Seattle or a Washington, the last couple of years. The day-to-day is where it all starts and eventually where it all ends. And I think the most direct answer would be, in order to get to that point, you have to stay in the moment. You have to stay in the present, focus on what you're doing in every given time. And then you look up and you're like, whoa, this is where we are now. And all we did was keep our heads down and keep focused. I mean, the idea of being focused on performance-based psychology versus being focused on growth-based psychology, I think can have a tremendous effect on feelings of failure versus feelings of growth. And so I think for this team, my hope, and I think our staff and our team's hope, is that we can stay in the moment. We can stay focused on every single day and every practice and every interaction we have with one another.
All right. Coach Walt Hopkins with Minnesota Lynx, staying in the moment, being the key to the season. I really appreciate it. Seriously, you're welcome back anytime. I hope this isn't the last time that we speak. Good luck.
Yeah,
have a great
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate the time, and thanks for having me on.
All right. Thanks again to Walt Hopkins for being on the show. Hopefully you enjoyed that as much as we did. As always, we'd remind you, if you want to connect with the show, find us on Facebook and Twitter at WNBA Weekly. If you want to support the show in a more financial way, you can always check us out at patreon.com/WNBA Weekly. And last but not least, if you would like to rep the show, we do have a merch store. You can check that out at WNBAweekly.storeenvy.com. That's Store Envy with only one E in the middle. As always, we'd encourage you to subscribe to our show. Check us out on YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher. Pretty much anywhere you can get a podcast is where you can find us. If you have a pod grabber that we're not on, let us know, because we want to be there. With all of that said, until next time, my name is Jason Snow, and we've got you next week.